Video game development is an unpredictable beast. Creatives come and go, ideas change, and core mechanics sometimes have to be ripped out entirely at the last minute. It's a bit like being on a really cool roller coaster, except everything is on fire and you can't put it out because you're too busy crowbarring microtransactions into places they don't need to be. Whatever the reason though, be it time or simply creative decisions, this manner of production has led to plenty of amazing features set to be included in the biggest gaming releases, which were tragically cut out. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 amazing features cut from popular video games. Number 8. The entire ending, Knights of the Old Republic 2. Considering the truncated development, Obsidian did a pretty great job following up BioWare's seminal Knights of the Old Republic. Only being given 16 months to finish the game though, it's no wonder that the studio's vision for the sequel wasn't fully realized, to the point where the majority of the ending had to be cut out in order to get the title finished on time. The finale which shipped isn't terrible by any means, but it's certainly, how do I put this nicely, abrupt. Modders later found out that the original ending was far more ambitious, discovering leftover prompts in the game's code. Because they're a bunch of lovely folks though, Obsidian actually released a lot of the assets from the cut ending, which modders quickly took and used to fill in the blanks. It still wasn't perfect, but it was at least closer to how the devs had originally intended to see the title out. Number 7. Expanded Civil War, Skyrim. Skyrim Civil War defined the entire region, and that, of course, meant that you could join the conflict yourself. If you did though, most of the interesting political implications were pushed to the side, in favour of sacking a few forts instead. And once you'd done that a few times, your side just won. It was an easy resolution that wasn't really different from the other quests in the game. Ha! How is that for a nice cold take on a 7-year-old game, eh? But still, it felt a little disappointing considering the supposed scale of the conflict. Originally, however, the Civil War was going to be far more dynamic. You could lose battles for one, which would either force you to go on the offensive or defensive. City sieges would have made an appearance as well, adding large stakes to fights and showing its effects on regular people. In general, it was supposed to have a bigger impact on the entire world, instead of carrying the same weight as a side quest that had you looking for dragonflies in the woods. Number 6. Songbirds boss battles, BioShock Infinite. It's no secret that a lot changed during the tumultuous development of BioShock Infinite, but by far the most tragic concept was Songbirds' gameplay-centric role. Sure, the mechanical giant turns up here and there to play up the Beauty and the Beast analogy between it and Elizabeth, but it's a surprisingly passive force until you get to control it in the final hour. That was all radically different originally though, as Songbird was intended to be more akin to Nemesis, a boss who'd constantly dog you throughout your journey. Players would have been given a choice every time the bird descended, either hide or attack it and scare it off. Which approach you took would have affected Booker's relationship with Elizabeth, altering how they interacted as the story continued. It sounds like a cool idea, even though I wouldn't have been taking it on with one of the pea shooters you got in that game. I mean, just look at the size of this thing. Number 5. Stormy Ascent, Crash Bandicoot. As everyone rediscovered when the Insane trilogy released last year, the original Crash Bandicoot is hard. Like, really hard. Like, I'd let a shady man with grubby fingers sell one of my kidneys if it meant I didn't have to play these levels again hard. Specifically, the areas around Slippery Climb were some of the worst, forcing players to methodically scale the outside of a castle with spikes, retractable steps, and grabby hands, hopefully not the same as the black market kidney dealers, but I can't rule it out, around every step. However, there was one level which was supposed to cap this area off, a map which was so difficult and so long that the developers eventually deemed it too frustrating and cut it entirely. It was essentially Slippery Climb, but with even more traps and pitfalls. A level where death was often preferable to missing a jump and falling 4 stories down and having to retrace your steps back up. It did eventually make its way to consoles, but not until Activision decided to remaster the original Crash decades later. Number 4. A bunch of different traversal options, Uncharted 4. A lot changed between Amy Hennig stepping away from Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us directors Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann coming in. While most of that concerned the story, there were a few gameplay mechanics Hennig's team were prototyping that were ultimately sacrificed in the shakeup as well. Most of them had to do with traversal and exploration. After all, Nathan Drake didn't even pick up a gun for the majority of this original incarnation. These mechanics included the ability to slide and then propel Nate forward to gain some extra momentum, which could have transformed players into bona fide superheroes when combined with the rope swing mechanic. The most interesting addition though was the option for players to shoot footholds into surfaces in order to climb them, which at the very least would have explained how every environment in these games comes pre-equipped with accessible routes for adventurers to exploit. Number 3. A moddable BFG Doom. 2016's Doom gained huge success by going back to basics, putting players in control of a no-nonsense space marine who lived for effing up demons' days. Swapping out boring weapons for laser rifles and more rockets than you could fit into the Matrix's endless white room, the one gun everyone wanted to get their hands on, naturally, was the BFG. A staple of the series since the very first game, the big freaking gun, yeah, we're PG now, already packed a punch. But it was originally supposed to be even more deadly. In fact, rather than just being saved for key moments, it was at one point something you could carry around at any time, with a whole host of different firing modes depending on which modules you had equipped. The different attacks were extensive, ranging from rapid-fire beams of energy to being able to melt enemies with goddamn hellfire. Why it was omitted is unclear, but let's hope these discarded ideas make their way into the sequel. Number 2. Mission 51, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Look, it's no secret that Metal Gear Solid 5, the supposed finale to the entire saga, ended up shipping in an unfinished state on account of Konami and Kojima coming to blows over the project. Nothing made that more clear though than the mysterious Mission 51, which showed up online after release in an unfinished form. The unreleased quest would have provided closure to some of the loose narrative threads in the final game, which there was so many of. Specifically, this mission would have had players exploring an entirely new region and retaking philanthropist from Eli, who just ticks off with the Metal Gear in the final game and never appears again. It also would have wrapped up Psycho Mantis' story, another character who disappears without explanation. Number 1. $1 Million Mayhem, Batman: Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight was already packed with content when it released in 2015, but one mythical challenge map, $1 Million Mayhem, was cut from the final release. Different to the regular challenges, this trial would have swapped Batman out for the Joker, encouraging players to cause as much damage in the Batmobile as possible in the space of 5 minutes, and, hilariously enough, send the bill to Wayne Enterprises, which yeah, is definitely something I might start seeing in restaurants from now on. Though the loss of a single challenge map isn't a big deal, it was the fact that it would have allowed players to take control of the Clown Prince of Crime himself. He hadn't featured in this part of the Arkhamverse since the original Arkham Asylum, and even then he was locked off to owners of the PlayStation 3 edition of the game.